What happens when love, money, and betrayal collide in the most spectacular way? Carter Langston was a self-made millionaire with a gorgeous pregnant wife, Liana. From the outside, their life in a penthouse loft above downtown Seattle was a modern fairy tale. But behind the perfect facade, a venomous secret was festering. Carter's passionate affair with the fiery Naomi Velez. When Liana vanishes without a trace, Carter and Naomi believe they're finally free. They pop champagne, celebrating a future built on a lie. But their party comes to a screeching halt when the police knock on their door, holding her final, chilling message. Carter Langston considered himself the master of his universe. His kingdom was a sprawling, ultra-modern loft high above the Seattle skyline, a fortress of steel beams and floor-to-ceiling glass. At 36, he had the kind of wealth that wasn't just lived in, but wielded. He'd built a digital commerce empire from his basement, and the world had rewarded him with magazine covers, speaking gigs, and the freedom to do whatever, and whomever, he pleased. His wife, Liana, was another of his prized acquisitions. She was stunning, of course, with a kind of quiet grace that made her seem like a Renaissance painting come to life. He'd met her at an art fundraiser. She was a museum curator, thoughtful and composed, and she had looked at him not with the hunger he saw in most women's eyes, but with a curious restraint that intrigued him. Marrying her had been the perfect strategic move. She was his anchor to legitimacy, the calm, polished contrast to his relentless ambition. And now she was 7 months pregnant with his child, his heir, the final jewel in his crown. But perfection, Carter had found, was dreadfully dull. The silence of their home was the first thing that greeted him on that Tuesday afternoon. It was a heavy, unnatural silence, unusual for a space that, despite its clean lines and expanse, was usually filled with the subtle signs of Liana's presence. The faint strains of piano music playing on the sound system, the earthy scent of the ginger tea she brewed daily, the soft rustle of pages from whatever novel she was reading near the sunlit windows. "Liana?" he called out, his voice echoing against the high white ceilings. He dropped his keys, heavy with a titanium ring, into a minimalist ceramic tray on the entry table. The clatter sounded far too loud in the stillness. No answer. He frowned, a flicker of annoyance prickling at the back of his neck. She was supposed to be here. They had a dinner that evening, a dreary tech industry fundraiser he couldn't avoid, where he was expected to showcase his glowing, expectant wife like a prize. She knew the plan. Liana was nothing if not meticulous. The clatter was jarringly loud. No answer. He frowned, a flicker of irritation crawling at the base of his neck. She was supposed to be here. They had a dinner that evening, a mind-numbing non-profit gala he couldn't escape, where he was expected to parade his glowing pregnant wife like a trophy. She knew the schedule. Liana was nothing if not exact. He walked through the living space, his expensive leather Oxfords silent on the polished concrete floors. The loft was immaculate, sterile. A floor-to-ceiling window, 20 feet high, framed the city skyline as dusk settled in, casting gold reflections on the buildings beyond. On a low Italian sectional, a cashmere throw lay folded with clinical perfection. Nothing was out of place. It was that eerie order that first seeded the real sense of unease. Liana was tidy, yes, but she lived here. There was always a half-sipped mug of tea, a novel left open spine up on the coffee table, a pair of her soft suede slippers kicked carelessly by the door. He checked the kitchen, spotless. Chrome and white marble surfaces gleamed back at him, cold and too clean, mirroring his increasingly tense face. He took the stairs faster now, glass steps suspended by steel cables. "Liana," he called, voice tightening. "This isn't funny." Their bedroom was as pristine as the rest of the loft. The massive platform bed was made with exacting care. Her walk-in closet, nearly the size of his first apartment, was flawless, garments hanging by shade and fabric in curated rows. He scanned the designer blouses and dresses. Nothing seemed missing. But how could he know? He'd memorized the cost of the wardrobe, not the contents. It was in the adjoining dressing area that he saw it. On the white marble vanity, beside a crystal vase of wilting peonies, lay her phone. Her clutch for the evening, a shimmering silver mulberry, rested beside it. Her car keys, too. An icy dread crept into his chest. Liana never went anywhere without her phone. She wasn't glued to it out of habit, but out of a quiet obligation, to be reachable for him, always. He picked it up. The screen was dark. He tapped the side button. Nothing. Dead. Strange. Liana was obsessive about keeping her devices charged. Carter strode back into the hallway, his heart starting to beat faster. He checked the nursery, a room painted in soft grays and buttery yellows, filled with expensive, still unboxed furniture. Empty. He checked the gym, the media lounge, the guest suites. Nothing, just more silence, more chilling order. He pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over the contact for his private security director. But he hesitated. What would he even say? That his wife was missing? She was probably just out for a walk. But the thought was ridiculous. Liana didn't just go for a walk, not without her phone, not an hour before they were expected at a major civic function. She didn't deviate from a plan. Ever. His mind wasn't flooded with concern, it was racing, but not from fear, from strategy. This was an inconvenience, a disruption, and Carter Langston was a man who solved disruptions. He dialed a different number, one not stored under any real name. It rang twice before a sultry voice answered. "You're not going to believe this," he said, his voice low and clipped. "Try me," came Naomi Velez's smoky reply, smooth, confident, and the total opposite of Liana's gentle tone. "She's gone." A pause. "Gone? Gone where? To get groceries?" "No, Naomi. Gone. Vanished. Her phone's here, her keys, her purse for tonight. The place is—" He stopped, glancing around the immaculate space again. Too perfect. It's like she evaporated. He could practically hear the slow, wicked grin spreading across Naomi's face. She was the daughter of his main investor, a sharp and calculated woman with amber eyes and a moral compass that unfailingly pointed toward self-interest. Their affair had been a firestorm for nearly a year, a dangerous, intoxicating reprieve from the dull rhythm of his marriage. Well, Naomi murmured, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial purr. "Has Christmas come early?" "Don't," he snapped. But even as the word left his lips, a dark thrill rose in his chest. This is serious. What if something happened to her, to the baby? Even to him, the words sounded rehearsed, a performance of concern. "Oh, Carter, please," Naomi scoffed. "Don't play the worried husband with me. She probably got tired of playing the perfect little doll and ran off to go find herself. Good for her. Better for us." He sank down onto the edge of his meticulously made bed, the cold dread in his stomach now wrestling with a heady, dangerous sense of possibility. What if Naomi was right? What if Liana had simply left? The idea was intoxicating. No lawyers, no courtroom drama, no public scandal to stain his legacy. Just a silent, perfect exit. "I have to do something," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "I have to call the police. That's what a husband would do." "Of course," Naomi replied. "You have to play the part. We both do. I'll be the concerned friend of the family. I'll call you in an hour, frantic, asking if you've heard from her. We'll build the story. Be distraught. My love? Be devastated. Give the performance of your life." He ended the call, his mind sharpened. Naomi was right. This was a role, a script. He inhaled slowly, picturing a spotlight, an audience. He was Carter Langston, the desperate, grieving husband. He rehearsed the quiver in his voice as he dialed 911. "My wife," he said, expertly letting his voice crack. "She's pregnant. I think she's missing." The next few hours passed in a haze of procedural urgency. 2 uniformed officers arrived, a man and a woman, both stoic, professional. They moved through the loft like strangers in a museum, each step disturbing its curated stillness. They asked questions. When had he last seen her? "This morning, over breakfast." She was happy. "We were talking about baby names." A lie. They hadn't had a real conversation in weeks. What was she wearing? He guessed. Cashmere sweater. Maternity jeans, I think. He tried to summon her image, but all he could see was Naomi's sly, victorious smile. Did she have enemies? Had she seemed depressed? No, he said, shaking his head. Everyone adored her. She was excited about the baby. More lies. He knew she was lonely. Had seen it in the way her eyes lingered too long on nothing at all. The sadness was there. He'd just chosen to ignore it. He called her parents, a retired couple in Maine, delivering the news in a measured blend of panic and sorrow. He listened to her mother's broken sobs, murmuring hollow reassurances, while a strange rising lightness stirred in his chest. By 10 p.m., the loft had become a command center. Detectives combed through rooms. Forensic teams dusted for fingerprints. A wasted effort in a space sanitized daily by a professional crew. The search had begun. Carter sat in his stark, white-walled living room, the city lights below flickering like a blanket of fractured stars, and performed his role. He raked a hand through his hair, stared blankly into the distance with haunted eyes, and took call after call from concerned friends. Each one was a small, exquisite act of despair. At midnight, the private gate buzzed. It was Naomi. She swept in wearing a sleek black trench coat, her dark hair pulled tight, her face painted with just the right amount of worry. She carried a bottle of whiskey, an outrageously expensive single malt. "For the nerves," she whispered, wrapping her arms around him in a hug that lingered just a beat too long, just a shade too intimate for anyone watching. But no one was. The living room was theirs alone. The lead detective had stepped away, granting him a moment of privacy. "They're treating it as high risk," Carter murmured into her shoulder, breathing in the sharp, designer scent of her perfume. It smelled like triumph. "Because of the pregnancy," he added. "Let them," Naomi said, pulling back to meet his eyes. They glinted with manic excitement. "Let them search. They won't find her." She was so sure, so untouchable, and her confidence, like everything else about her, was dangerously contagious. He felt the last remnants of his carefully crafted grief dissolve, replaced by something sharper, something alive. He was free. He led her to his study, the only room in the loft paneled in dark walnut, the one place that felt entirely his. He locked the door behind them. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey. Naomi raised hers, the amber liquid glowing in the dim light. "To new beginnings," she said, her voice low and electric. "To new beginnings," he echoed, clinking his glass against hers. They drank, the fire of it matching the illicit heat thrumming beneath their skin. There they were, standing inside the home of a missing pregnant woman, a home teeming with cops, and celebrating. The sheer audacity was heady. Naomi set down her glass and stepped toward him. She undid the top buttons of his shirt, her cool fingers brushing against his chest. "No more hiding, Carter," she whispered, her breath ghosting over his lips. "No more sneaking around. Soon, this will all be ours." He pulled her into him, kissing her hard, hungry. This was what he wanted. This chaos, this heat, not the quiet, steady devotion of Liana. He had built an empire, and he deserved a queen, not a ghost. As they stood locked in their embrace, a wave of unfiltered relief surged through Carter. Liana was gone. The problem had solved itself. He and Naomi had won. The future was a blank canvas, and for the first time in a long time, Carter Langston felt like he could paint anything he wanted on it. He was the master of his universe once more. And in his blissful, arrogant certainty, he never once considered that the ghost he'd so eagerly tried to banish might be the one still holding the brush. Detective Marcus Harding had a nose for lies. It was a precise instrument, tuned over 20 years of parsing the blurred lines between fact and fiction, through interrogation rooms, crime scenes, and boardrooms full of polished deception. He'd heard every kind of lie, from the stammering panic of a rookie thief to the silk-tongued narratives of career manipulators. Carter Langston, Harding had decided within the first 5 minutes of meeting him, belonged to an entirely different class. Harding didn't look the part of a lead investigator. His suits were off the rack and always slightly wrinkled, his salt and pepper hair perpetually mussed, more history professor than seasoned cop. But that worked in his favor. People didn't see him coming. He stood at the edge of the Langstons' cavernous loft, quietly observing, watching Carter perform. The subtle arch of his brow, the habitual rubbing of the back of his neck like he was burdened by grief. It was good, well-rehearsed even. But it was still a performance. There was no raw fear, no gut-wrenching chaos Harding had seen in truly distraught spouses. Carter Langston wasn't grieving, he was acting out what he thought grief should look like. "Mr. Langston," Harding said, voice steady as he stepped forward. "Detective Harding." Carter turned, his tone open, practiced. "We need to walk through the timeline one more time, if that's all right." "Of course, Detective. Anything I can do." "You said the last time you saw your wife was over breakfast? Around 8:30? "Yes," Carter replied smoothly. "She seemed happy. We were talking about the nursery." "And you left for your office at 9? "Correct. Had a board meeting. It ran through the morning." Harding scribbled a note in a battered little notebook. "And no contact with her at all after that? No messages, no calls?" Carter shook his head. "No." Something flickered in his eyes, A flash of irritation, gone almost instantly, replaced by a well-worn expression of sadness. I should have called. I get so caught up in work, I just assumed she was here, safe. So the first sign that something was wrong was when you got home around 6 p.m.? Yes, Carter nodded. The loft was empty. Her phone was on the vanity, dead. Detective Harding nodded slowly. And then you called. Who did you call first, Mr. Langston? Carter hesitated for the briefest moment, but Harding's internal lie detector picked up on it instantly. I called her parents, Carter said quickly. I thought maybe she'd reached out, that she wasn't feeling well, went to lie down, and let her phone die. Harding didn't respond. He just jotted down another note. The 911 call had come in at 6:15 p.m. Phone records, once pulled, would show exactly who he called first. A small lie, maybe, but it left a sour taste on Carter's tongue. Even as he said it, he could feel how flimsy it sounded, how hollow. There was a tremor he fought to suppress, not from grief, but from the growing dread curling like smoke in his chest. He wasn't shaken by Liana's absence. Not really. He was shaken by how unprepared he was for the performance, by how quickly the mask had to go on. Every fracture starts small. The next morning, the search escalated. Media vans lined the street outside Carter's private building, satellite dishes angled skyward like steel vultures. The headline was irresistible. Pregnant wife of tech mogul vanishes. Liana Langston's serene glowing face appeared on every screen, angelic, wholesome, which made Carter's image as the grieving husband all the more critical to maintain. He held a press conference on the building's front steps. Naomi Velez stood a few feet behind him, her hand resting gently on his arm, a perfect picture of quiet support. She, too, delivered a flawless performance. Her face radiated concern, her eyes full of tearless compassion. We are asking, begging, for anyone with information about my wife, Liana, to please come forward, Carter said, his voice thick, strained. She is the love of my life. She is carrying our child. My world is empty without her. Please, help bring my family home. Harding watched the whole thing from the precinct, the video playing on a small monitor in the corner of the office. The love of his life, he muttered, half to himself, half to Detective Chen beside him. Check his call logs, Harding added. That number saved as IR? I want to know who it is. And get a warrant for both their cell tower pings. Let's see how far apart they really were yesterday. Because while Carter Langston played the grieving husband for the cameras, behind the scenes he and Naomi were growing bolder and more careless. The uniformed officers had faded. The real work of the investigation had begun, the slow, grinding kind. The immediate crisis had passed, and in its place came a dizzying, dangerous calm. They suspect nothing, Carter said that night, pacing across the length of his study. The door was locked again. Naomi sat perched on the edge of his desk, slowly swirling a glass of deep red wine. Of course they don't, she replied, taking a dainty sip. You're the beloved tech mogul, the devoted husband, and she's the sweet, gentle wife who wouldn't hurt a soul. They're probably chasing some lunatic stalker, or a kidnapping gone wrong. The company, Carter began, a flicker of genuine concern knitting his brow. Your father called. He's worried about the optics. A scandal like this. Let my father worry, Naomi interrupted, sliding off the desk and walking toward him. She straightened the lapels of his tailored jacket with cool precision. This is good, Carter. Long term. Think about the narrative, the sympathy. The public will circle around you. The board will back you. And when enough time passes, when you're ready to move on, who do you think will be there, waiting to comfort the heartbroken billionaire? She smiled. Slow. Predatory. Certain. Who will the world call your savior? Carter couldn't help himself. He smiled back. She was brilliant. Cold. Calculated. But brilliant. She was fire to the icy silence that had defined his marriage. She moved with the confidence of someone who didn't just believe in the plan, but relished it. And he found himself drawn to her with a hunger that blurred caution. Still, a flicker of unease skated beneath his skin. It was too smooth, too soon. But Naomi's certainty had a gravity of its own, pulling him deeper. She made him feel invincible. But their celebrations were starting to slip into recklessness. A private cleaner, brought in at Carter's insistence for a deep reset of the loft following the police sweep, would later tell investigators something that stood out. She found 2 wine glasses in the trash bin of the study, both with lipstick stains. One of them, a bold, vampy red. And she knew for a fact, Liana Langston only ever wore nude tones, if anything at all. Then there was the neighbor's camera. An older gentleman who lived in the building below Carter's had a security cam set up on his balcony. He was a bird watcher and liked recording nocturnal species. He'd been reviewing footage, hoping to assist. There were no suspicious cars, no break-ins. But there was something else. His camera had a direct view of a section of Carter's upper balcony. At exactly 12:30 a.m., the night of Liana's disappearance, just hours after Carter's tearful 911 call, two figures appeared in frame, a man and a woman, silhouetted but unmistakable. The man was tall and slim, like Carter. The woman rested in his arms. They kissed, long, intimately, not the embrace of a grieving friend. When Detective Harding saw the footage, a chill settled through him, sharp and satisfying. "There we go," Harding muttered to Chen. "That's our crack." The phone records had come in, and they were a roadmap to the affair. Hundreds of calls and messages exchanged between Carter Langston and a number saved as IR. Chen had already confirmed the number belonged to Naomi Velez, and on the day Liana disappeared, the data was damning. Carter hadn't left his office at 5:30 p.m. as he'd claimed. Cell tower pings placed his phone, leaving just after 3:30 p.m. Not en route home, but in Bellevue, within a block of a boutique hotel where Naomi kept a reserved suite. They were together from 3:15 to 5:15 p.m. His first call upon arriving home? Not to Liana's parents, not even to 911. It was to Naomi. A 7-minute conversation. That was enough for Harding. Time to apply pressure. He called both Carter and Naomi into the station, separately. He started with Naomi. She walked into the interview room radiating elegance and entitlement. "Detective," she said coolly, placing her luxury handbag on the table with care. "I hope this won't take long. Carter is still in a very fragile state. I don't want to leave him alone too long." "Of course, Miss Velez," Harding said, offering a sealed plastic water bottle. She ignored it. "You're close to the family, right?" "Very close," she replied, without missing a beat. "Liana is one of my dearest friends. I'm devastated, just sick about this." Her performance was airtight, not a flicker of hesitation. "So you'd know if there were any issues between Liana and Mr. Langston?" Naomi gave a crisp, dismissive laugh. "Issues? No. Carter adores her. They were thrilled about the baby. Their life was picture perfect." Harding leaned in then, calm demeanor shifting, tone sharper. "That's interesting, because fairy tales don't usually include the prince spending 2 hours in a hotel room with his pregnant wife's closest friend on the day she disappears." The mask cracked, just for a moment. A flash of wide eyes, primal fear. She recovered, but not fast enough. "I have no idea what you're implying," she said sharply, her voice icy. "No?" Harding said quietly, sliding a photo across the table. It was a still enhanced from the neighbor's security footage. Two shadowed figures on the upper deck, mid-embrace. "Do these look like two people who are just friends?" Naomi stared. Her grip tightened on the edge of the table, knuckles pale. "That's not us. That could be anyone. And I suppose the cell tower data placing you and Mr. Langston at the Bellevue Grand for 2 hours yesterday is also a coincidence?" Harding didn't wait for a reply. "And the 2 wine glasses in the study? The ones with your lipstick on them?" Whatever composure Naomi had left, it vanished. What replaced it was cornered fury. "This is harassment. My father is Lorenzo Velez. You are making a very big mistake, detective." "The only mistake I see," Harding said, rising from his chair, "is the two of you thinking you were smart enough to get away with it." He left Naomi stewing in the interview room, her fury and fear crackling like static. Then he moved to the adjacent room where Carter Langston sat waiting, with his high-priced attorney seated beside him. "Mr. Langston," Harding began, skipping pleasantries, "your timeline from yesterday afternoon has a 2-hour hole in it, a hotel-shaped hole. Want to explain that?" Carter's face blanched. His attorney raised a hand immediately. "My client has fully cooperated. We are under no obligation to discuss his personal life, which has zero relevance to his wife's disappearance." "Oh, but it has every relevance," Harding shot back. "It's called motive. The grieving husband isn't quite so believable when he's sleeping with his wife's best friend. It makes a jury wonder what else he's lying about." Carter's composure, the polished, composed image, was starting to crack. Harding could see it in his eyes. There was a flicker of something behind those eyes now. Panic, coiled tight like a spring. His throat bobbed once in a hard swallow, and he gripped the arms of the chair just a little too tightly. The calculated detachment he wore like armor was splintering, revealing the unspoken dread underneath. The feeling of freedom that had flooded Carter just days ago was gone, replaced now by something tighter, heavier. A cage built from his own lies. "We were celebrating," Carter blurted, ignoring the lawyer's sharp glance and subtle shake of the head. Harding tilted his head. "Celebrating? What were you celebrating, Mr. Langston? A contract? A merger?" "It was confidential," Carter stammered, the lie sounding weak even to himself. "A confidential business deal," Harding repeated, his voice flat with disbelief. "So let me get this straight. You expect me to believe you spent 2 hours in a hotel room with Miss Velez, then came home, drank whiskey with her in your study, kissed her on your balcony while your pregnant wife was missing, and it was all to celebrate a business deal? You weren't celebrating a deal, Mr. Langston. You were celebrating that she was gone." The accusation sat heavy in the air. Toxic, inescapable. Carter stared at Harding, his mind spinning. It had seemed so simple. Liana leaves. He plays the devastated husband. He and Naomi wait a few weeks, then start fresh. He had underestimated the investigation. He had underestimated Harding. He had been arrogant and careless. "I want my wife back," Carter growled, his voice low and sharp. "And you're wasting time harassing me instead of finding her." "Oh, we're looking for her, Mr. Langston," Harding replied, his eyes cold as steel. "But right now, this investigation is focused on you, and I've got to say, it's looking more and more like we're not going to find her alive." Harding turned and walked out, leaving Carter and his attorney sitting in silence, stunned. The walls of the interview room seemed to press inward. The euphoria Carter had felt just days ago had soured into something dark and paralyzing. He and Naomi had danced on Liana's grave, before she was even in it, and now Harding was handing them the shovels. For the next 3 days, Carter and Naomi lived in suspended terror. The initial thrill had vanished, replaced by an acidic fear that never left. They were pariahs in their own worlds. Carter's attorney advised them to stop all communication, but they couldn't resist. Their whispered calls came late at night, voices shaking with panic. "He knows," Carter hissed into the phone, crouched in the walk-in pantry of his silent, sterile loft. "Harding knows everything." "He knows nothing," Naomi snapped back, her tone taut with brittle confidence. "All he has is circumstantial garbage. A kiss, a hotel visit. It's salacious, sure. But it's not a crime. There's no body, Carter, no weapon, no proof. They've got nothing." She was right. Technically. But it didn't feel that way. The suspicion was suffocating. Carter saw it in the way his staff avoided his gaze, heard it in the quiet, careful voices of his business associates. He was no longer the grieving husband. He was the prime suspect. And the world he had so meticulously built was collapsing. The break in the case didn't come from a blurry camera angle or a cell phone ping. It came from the one place no one had thought to dig deep enough. Liana's digital life. Detective Chen, a young tech-forward officer on Harding's team, had been assigned to dig into Liana Langston's digital footprint. At first glance, it was clean. Almost too clean. Her social media was minimal and curated. Her emails were mundane, updates from museums, RSVPs to charity galas, confirmations for prenatal checkups. But Chen was relentless. She understood that people often lived second lives online. Secret blogs, hidden accounts, encrypted cloud backups. With a warrant and help from the cyber forensics team, Detective Chen began peeling back the pristine digital surface of Liana Langston's life. It was in a secondary cloud account, password protected, tied to a burner email, and named simply contingency, that she found it. Just one folder, one file, a video. The file was titled, "If You Are Reading This.mov." Detective Harding watched it for the first time on a large monitor in his office, Chen standing just behind him. The screen flickered. Then Liana's face appeared, startlingly close. She was in her dressing room, the one with the white marble vanity. The lighting was soft, but her face was anything but composed. Her eyes were red, swollen, her skin blotchy and bare. No makeup, no filters. This wasn't the radiant, polished woman from the news headlines. This was someone shattered. Even the way she sat, the slight hunch of her shoulders, the tremble in her chin, spoke of a deep, bone-deep exhaustion. It was as if she had carried a silent weight for so long that it had carved its imprint into her frame. She inhaled shakily, eyes locked on the camera lens like she was staring straight into the room with them. "My name is Liana Langston," she began, her voice trembling. "If you're watching this, it means I'm gone. It means Carter. It means he finally did what I was afraid he would do." Harding leaned in, resting his elbows on the desk. The room was silent, except for the sound of her fragile voice. "I know people think our life is perfect," she said, a bitter, tear-soaked laugh slipping out. "The condo, the money, it's all a cage, a beautiful, gilded cage. I tried to be the wife he wanted. I really did. I thought the baby would change things, our baby boy." She broke down, shoulders trembling as she sobbed silently. For a moment she covered her mouth as if to stifle the sound, ashamed of how raw she had become. Then, with visible effort, she straightened, blinking away the tears like she had done this 100 times before. She wiped her face, trying to pull herself together, but it only made him colder, more distant. "And then I found out about Naomi." She glanced away from the camera, shame flickering in her expression. "Naomi Velez. My friend, or at least I thought she was. They've been together for over a year. I found the emails, the hotel receipts. He's been moving money from one of his shell accounts to her, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I confronted him. I told him I wanted a divorce, that I'd take our son and leave." Her expression hardened, fear briefly giving way to rage. "He told me I'd get nothing. He said he'd ruin me in court, that he had the best lawyers money could buy, and he'd crush me. He said he would make me disappear before he'd ever let me take his son. Or his money." Liana looked straight into the camera again, and the fear in her eyes was unmistakably real. "He's been different the last few weeks. He watches me. He asks weird questions, about my schedule, about my parents. Naomi calls the house, and when I pick up, she just hangs up. They're planning something. I can feel it. I'm so scared." Her voice cracked. "Not for me, for my baby." Tears were pouring down her face now, uncontrolled. "I'm making this video because if anything happens to me, I don't want them to get away with it. I don't want them raising my son. Check the financials. Langston Innovations, subsidiary Apex Holdings. Check the offshore accounts. It's all there. The money he gave her, he's been giving her everything. He just needed to get rid of me." Her hand reached toward the lens, trembling, and the screen went black. Harding leaned back in his chair. A long breath escaped him. "My God," he whispered. "It's a confession from beyond the grave," Chen said, her voice tight with awe. "Motive, conspiracy, financial crimes. It's all there. She handed us the whole case. On a silver platter," Harding said. Then he stood. "Get this to forensics. Confirm the video's integrity. Timestamp everything. I want financial warrants. Apex Holdings, all of it. Every transaction Carter Langston and Naomi Velez have made in the last 12 months. And get me arrest warrants for both of them. Conspiracy to commit murder." The trap closed that evening. Carter was in his study, alone with a half-empty bottle of whiskey, when the knock came. He opened the door to find Detective Harding on the other side, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. Harding's expression was unreadable. "Carter Langston," the detective said, voice flat. "You're under arrest for the murder of your wife, Liana Langston." The words didn't compute. "Murder?" Carter stammered, an incredulous laugh bubbling out of him. "That's insane. You haven't even found a body. You've got nothing." Harding stared him down. "We have something better," he said coldly. "We have her last words." They cuffed him and led him through his immaculate, white-walled penthouse. Carter felt like he was floating, like he was watching it all happen to someone else. His empire had flipped, his world had shattered. He had been so certain of his own power, his invincibility. Carter Langston had believed he was the master of the board. Now, with everything crumbling around him, he saw it all with sickening clarity. He hadn't even understood the rules. Naomi was arrested at her father's estate in Redmond. They took her from the dinner table, right in front of her stunned, dignified parents. She remained poised, regal even, as they cuffed her, chin lifted, spine straight. But the flicker in her eyes betrayed her. The practiced calm of a woman born into elegance wavered just enough for the fear to shine through. It wasn't just fear of consequences. It was the terror of watching an empire built on seduction and secrecy collapse in an instant. But Harding, there to personally oversee the arrest, saw it clearly. The terror in her eyes. The look of a woman raised like royalty about to be thrown into the dungeon. At the station, they were placed in separate interrogation rooms. No attorneys this time. No shields, no lifelines. Harding entered Carter's room first, a laptop tucked under his arm. He set it on the table and opened it, eyes never leaving Carter's. "I want you to watch something," he said, pressing play. Liana's face filled the screen. Carter watched, silent, frozen. He saw her tears, heard the tremble in her voice, watched her recount his affair, his threats, the secret money trails he thought were invisible. Each word drove a nail into the coffin. It was a prosecutor's dream. Tight, tragic, and terrifying. She had twisted facts, exaggerated his indifference, painted him a monster. And the worst part? She was heartbreakingly believable. Every pause in her speech, every quiet tear was calibrated, yet looked completely unplanned. And Carter, watching it now, felt something colder than fear snake up his spine, the realization that she had known exactly how this would unfold. When the video ended, Carter sat pale and hollow. That's a lie," he murmured. "She's lying." She was unstable, depressed. Harding leaned in, calm and deadly. "Doesn't matter if it's a lie, Mr. Langston. What matters is this: 12 jurors are going to believe it. They're going to see a scared, pregnant woman. And they're going to see you, a ruthless, cheating billionaire who threatened to erase her. Who do you think they're going to believe?" Carter had no reply. Liana hadn't just set a trap to make them look guilty of her disappearance. She'd crafted a bomb to blow up their entire lives. Even the financial side of the case alone would destroy him. Harding left the room and crossed the hall. Naomi was waiting. He played the same video. Her reaction was nothing like Carter's. There was no shock, just rage. Naomi snarled, her face twisting with fury. "That little manipulative bitch, she played us. She played us both." "No," Harding corrected, "she played you. Or maybe she just told the truth. Either way, Miss Velez, your party's over." He looked at her, the fury on her face barely masking something deeper, primal, frightened. He saw the gears turning behind her eyes. Naomi Velez was a survivor. "Right now," Harding said quietly, "your only friend in the world is the first one who decides to cut a deal." Then he left her alone. Left her with Liana's voice echoing in her ears and the crushing reality of a murder charge closing in. And it echoed. Not just the words, but the trembling conviction in Liana's voice. Naomi sat frozen in that stark room, her perfectly curated image unraveling with every second. For the first time she felt cornered, truly cornered, with no charm, no money, and no powerful father to extract her. He had them. Cold. Walking down the hallway, Harding felt that rare, grim satisfaction of a case well and truly broken open. He had delivered justice for a woman who deserved it. And yet, as he drove home that night, a single thought kept tugging at him. The video. It was too perfect. The confession, the emotion, the timing. Too clean. Liana had specifically mentioned Apex Holdings, a buried shell company, a subsidiary of Langston Innovations. But how would a sheltered art historian, someone supposedly naive to corporate structure, know that exact name? It wasn't just panic behind those eyes in the video. It was precision, a quiet, calculated presence hiding beneath the tears. Harding had seen victims plead, he had seen fear. But he had never seen strategy wear such a fragile mask so well. It wasn't just fear, it was planning, deliberate, strategic, almost brilliant. The world that once worshipped Carter Langston now reveled in his fall. His downfall was a media supernova. The video, leaked anonymously of course, spread like wildfire. Its tear-streaked audio looped on every screen, every podcast, every crime special. Carter and Naomi were no longer human. They were symbols now, villains in a modern morality play. Their booking photos replaced their former glamorous portraits on magazine covers. Headlines screamed, "Billionaire Betrayer," "The Mistress and the Murder." And behind the icy gray walls of a high-security detention center, Carter Langston, once the self-made king of tech, was learning the meaning of true powerlessness. Deemed a flight risk with international ties, he was denied bail. His universe now measured 8 by 10 feet. The tailored suits were gone, replaced by a stiff orange jumpsuit. The influence he once wielded with a whisper was now reduced to silence. And those who once deferred to him? Gone. All that remained were guards who barely looked at him. And he, who once predicted entire market crashes, had missed the most important one, the storm in his own home. The news from the outside came in brutal, relentless waves. The board of Langston Innovations, led by none other than his former father-in-law-to-be, Lorenzo Velez, had voted him out as CEO in a humiliating emergency session. His assets were frozen. Every account, every portfolio, flagged in the sprawling financial investigation sparked by Liana's video. The white-on-white penthouse that once symbolized his empire, now a crime scene, its market value plummeting under the stench of scandal. He was ruined. Utterly. Comprehensively. And in the sterile hum of prison, Carter Langston's fury had nowhere to go. It coiled inside him like smoke in a sealed room. He paced, replayed, rewrote, and still it ended the same. Liana had won. The woman he had dismissed, disregarded, underestimated at every turn, had outmaneuvered him completely. It fermented into something acidic, an obsessive loop of self-destruction. Every conversation, every smug assumption. Every time he underestimated the quiet woman who once lay beside him. Naomi, isolated in a different wing of the same facility, was staring down her own personal apocalypse. The seductive, ruthless confidence that had once so enthralled Carter? Gone. Wiped out by unfiltered, rising panic. Her father, a man who valued reputation more than family, hadn't just disowned her, he'd erased her. A blistering public statement from the Velez family called her actions a source of profound shame and sorrow, effectively cutting her off from every part of her world. Her phone calls were met with silence. Her once glamorous social life, a constellation of power and privilege, imploded overnight. The life she had known was gone. And in its place, a gnawing horror grew. The realization that there was no redemption arc waiting, no rescue from this narrative. No one would write her a softer ending. All that remained was the harsh hum of fluorescent lights, the endless gray of her cell, and the rising dread of a life sentence. Their bond, born of lust, ambition, and arrogance, shattered under the weight of their reality. Their lawyers, sensing blood and headlines, made the unspoken clear. It was every person for themselves. And Naomi, ever the survivor, folded first. Her attorney, Marcus Thorne, was ruthless and efficient. He laid it out cold in the sterile visiting room. They've got the video, the financials, the kiss on the balcony, 2 hours after Liana disappeared. A jury's going to crucify you. Your only way out is to play the victim. The brainwashed, lovesick accomplice of a manipulative monster. You hand them Carter Langston on a platter, and maybe, just maybe, the DA lets you plead down. Accessory after the fact. You'll still serve time, but you'll get to see the outside again. The decision wasn't hard. It never had been, not for her. Not when survival was on the table. She weighed the years, the silence of the cell, the ruin, and folded like a queen pretending to be a pawn. Survival had always been Naomi's strongest instinct, she agreed. She would become the prosecution's star witness. Her testimony, the final sharpened spike driven into Carter Langston's coffin. When Carter's attorney broke the news of Naomi's betrayal, he didn't just feel rage. What Carter Langston felt was far worse. Something hollow, bottomless. Despair. He had been discarded by his company, by his friends. Now, by the woman for whom he had torched his entire life. He was alone, utterly and completely, trapped in a nightmare, crafted with surgical precision by the wife he had so thoughtlessly, so fatally underestimated. And where was the architect of his collapse? Not in a shallow desert grave, as the prosecution so graphically alleged in their opening arguments. Not at the bottom of the ocean wrapped in chains. Liana Langston, or as she was now known, Anja Novak, was watching the sunset from the balcony of a sun-kissed apartment overlooking the turquoise waters of the Adriatic Sea. Her new home was nestled in a quiet Croatian coastal town, a place filled with crooked old furniture, colorful woven rugs, and the scent of lemons and salt drifting up from the garden below. She was very much alive. The timid woman who had drifted through Carter's condo like a ghost, gone. In her place stood someone calm, certain, unshakable. Her hair, once a dull, forgettable blonde, was now a rich auburn, cropped into a sleek, low-maintenance bob. She wore no makeup. Her belly, round and prominent, shifted gently beneath her hand as she sat for hours, watching the fishing boats drift in and out of the harbor while she scrolled international headlines on her tablet. This plan hadn't been sparked by one moment of fury. It had crystallized over a year of quiet, methodical heartbreak. It started with a receipt, not a lipstick stain, but a hotel suite charge on a hidden credit card. A hotel she had never been to. It was a thread, and once she pulled it, she never let go. Julian, or rather Carter, had believed the prenup was airtight. But he never looked closely at the personal art acquisition fund. It included a generous discretionary allowance. From that account, she quietly hired a private investigator, a former Mossad agent, recommended by a gallery owner she knew in Tel Aviv. He delivered everything, a dossier as thick as a novel, complete with photos, timelines, and a forensic breakdown of the financial trail between Carter and Naomi. But it wasn't the PI's report that solidified her plan. It was the confrontation, the moment she stood before Carter and watched the mask slip, the dismissiveness, the veiled threats, the cold smirk when she mentioned divorce. "I will make you disappear before I ever let you take my son or my money." That moment didn't instill fear in Liana Langston. It didn't break her. It forged her. It awakened something else, something buried but unbreakable. Resolve. She realized then that Carter would never let her go. He believed he owned her. To him, she was an asset. And Carter Langston never released an asset unless he destroyed it first. So she decided to stop being an asset. She would become a liability. A problem. And when he discarded her, she'd ensure that the entire empire burned down with her. For months, she lived a double life. By day, the sweet, obedient, pregnant wife. By night, a tactician, a woman engineering her escape. She used a burner laptop, encrypted browsers, and public Wi-Fi at libraries and cafes across Seattle. She dove headfirst into a world she never knew existed. She researched extradition laws, safe havens for fugitives, and the legal loopholes that could keep her free. She studied corporate fraud, forensic accounting, until she could read one of Carter's balance sheets as easily as a gallery exhibition catalog. That's when she found it, Apex Holdings, his private funnel. A convoluted shell company used to hide income and finance Naomi. It was arrogant, embodied in financial structure, and she used it against him. She didn't drain the account all at once. She bled it. Tiny, unnoticeable transfers. Each click of the mouse was an act of rebellion. Each line of code, a quiet scream. She felt power for the first time, not from shouting, but from slipping through cracks he didn't know existed. She opened anonymous crypto wallets, used chain tumblers to obscure the money trail, then filtered it slowly into offshore accounts under a new name. Her name, Anja Novak. The identity came from her Israeli contact, the same one who found her PI. It wasn't cheap, but the passport, birth certificate, and driver's license were flawless. They came with a digital history strong enough to survive scrutiny. Then came the video, her masterpiece, her pièce de résistance. She filmed it in pieces, over weeks, every word scripted, every emotion rehearsed. She studied victim psychology and police interview tapes, learning how to replicate genuine fear. She practiced crying in the mirror, the trembling lip, the stammering voice, until it wasn't acting anymore. It became muscle memory, a survival instinct, a performance rooted in truth. She was ready. The video's release was timed with mathematical precision, an encrypted email set to trigger 72 hours after her disappearance. The recipient? A high-profile true crime blogger with a rabid following. The delay was key. It gave detectives just enough time to uncover the affair themselves, just enough time for Carter and Naomi to start looking guilty. And then the video would drop like a bomb, not as an accusation, but as confirmation. Her execution was flawless. While Carter was busy with Naomi, wrapped up in lust and illusion, Liana's plan entered its final act. She packed a single, unremarkable bag. She walked out through the back service entrance, careful to avoid the security cameras. Every blind spot had been mapped months before. A car waited, booked anonymously, paid in cash by a proxy. But it didn't head to SeaTac Airport. It drove her deep into the Mojave, to a small, private airfield. A jet was waiting, chartered, prepaid in Monero, completely untraceable. By the time Carter Langston was arriving home to an immaculate, eerily silent apartment to perform his role as the worried husband, Liana was already airborne, a cold glass of sparkling water in her hand, the country that had caged her for years shrinking behind her, mile by mile. Now, 6 months later, she sat in her sunlit Croatian apartment, scrolling through headlines detailing Naomi's weeping testimony about Carter's cruelty, and felt nothing but calm, hard satisfaction. They had built their future on the assumption of her weakness. They had underestimated her. and now they were paying the price. She hadn't just escaped, she had reclaimed her life, she had secured her child's future, and she had delivered her own kind of justice. Liana Langston was gone, Anja Novak had won, and her fortune? Far greater than Carter ever imagined she could possess or control. A few weeks later, in a small modern hospital overlooking the Adriatic, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Miles, a quiet, ironic tribute to the man she had subtly nudged into becoming the weapon of her revenge, Detective Miles Harding. Now she sat in a warm apartment filled with ocean breeze and morning light, her son sleeping in her arms. He had her eyes. He was safe. He was hers. He would never know the sterile white cage of his father's world. He would grow up free. And as she gazed at his perfect little face, peace, true, unshakable peace, settled into her bones. The world believed Liana Langston was dead, but the truth? She had never been more alive. In the end, Carter Langston wasn't destroyed by a killer. He was destroyed by the ghost he made. Naomi Velez, the supposed survivor, walked away with a lighter sentence, but she was sentenced all the same to a life permanently tarnished, a prisoner of her own ambition. The story of Liana Langston became a cautionary tale, a reminder that silence isn't weakness, that the quietest person in the room might just be the most dangerous. She played the long game, and she proved that true power isn't wealth, isn't titles, it's will, the unbreakable will to survive. So now we ask you, was she a victim who fought back, or a cold, calculated villain? Was her revenge justified? Let us know in the comments. So the story is over, our wonderful friends. Are you still here at this hour? If you are, that probably means something in this journey touched your heart. Maybe it was the courage, maybe the betrayal, or maybe the quiet strength of someone underestimated for too long. Let's take a breath together and look at what this story leaves behind, not just in headlines or courtroom drama, but in life. Because at its core, this story isn't just about a tech mogul, a mistress, and a missing wife. It's about power, not the kind found in bank accounts or boardrooms, but the power of the human will. Liana Langston didn't have influence, she didn't have protection, but what she did have was resolve, and that is something no one could take from her. She reminds us that survival isn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes it's the quiet, meticulous steps taken in the dark that rewrite destiny. Sometimes justice doesn't come from a courtroom, but from the unwavering will of someone who refuses to be erased. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb inside of his skin and walk around in it. Harper Lee, To Kill a Mockingbird. This quote hits differently when you think of Liana, not as a victim or a villain, but as a woman who dared to walk out of her pain and design her own future. So maybe this isn't just a story. Maybe it's a mirror. A reminder that we too have the power to survive betrayal, to outgrow old cages, and to start over. Stronger, freer, and truer to ourselves. If this story stayed with you, even a little, please let us know in the comments. Like, share this with someone who needs strength tonight, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories that matter. Because sometimes, the truth doesn't just set you free. It sets the world on fire.